Hello and welcome to Oh Hello Maker. Whether this is your first kit or you've been crafting along with me for a while now, you are going to absolutely love today's tutorial, my Jesmonite tray. But what exactly is Jesmonite? Well, it's a non-toxic, water-based casting material, very similar to plaster of Paris or concrete. It works by mixing up a liquid called AC100 with a Jesmonite base powder. You simply mix up 1 part liquid to 2.5 parts base powder. And then you can cast anything from plant pots to coasters to jewellery to the trays that I'm going to be showing you today. Now, once you've mixed the powder and the liquid together, the Jesmonite starts to set almost straight away, so you have to work really quickly. Make sure you've got everything set out: scales, pots, whisk, spatula, something to cover your work surface. You want it all set out ready so you can avoid it going lumpy. Now, although Jesmonite isn't solvent-based like other resins, I do recommend wearing a face covering, as when you pour the powder in, it can sometimes puff up into the air. And you may also want to wear plastic gloves, as the pigment can stain, but it's not essential. Please be mindful if you've got children about, please keep the kit away from them. This is an adult-only kit. I know you are going to love this craft so much. I love it, I'm pretty new to it too, but the results are so beautiful and so professional, you'll be absolutely blown away. Another thing that makes Jesmonite so great is once you've actually poured the Jesmonite into the mould, you only have to wait 25 minutes before you demould it. I cannot stress enough how quickly you have to work with this material. I think you're going to really love this tutorial. If you do, please do share some pictures on Instagram or Facebook. Please tag me, Oh Hello Maker, and use the hashtag OhHelloMakerBox. I will be selling this kit as a one-off too, so go tell your friends to get one. Right, that's enough from me. Let's get cracking and start making those trays.
First up is the marble tray. So pop your jug onto the scales and then give the liquid a really good shake first, obviously with the lid on. Start to pour it into the jug until you get exactly 60 grams. Then pop that to one side. Then get a different jug, set the scales to 0 again. Then start tipping the powder into the jug. So you weigh out 150 grams of the base powder. You may want to wear a mask here, as the powder does tend to go up into the air, but it's entirely up to you. It is a water-based, non-toxic product, so entirely up to you. Start by tipping a little of the powder into the liquid. Then you want to start whisking it really well by hand. You can really give it some welly here, don't be shy. And add a bit more. And then keep whisking. Scrape around the sides with a whisk as well to pick up all of the excess powder. Your aim is to get rid of all of the lumps from the powder. Continue tipping in the powder and whisking a little bit at a time. But remember, the Jesmonite does start setting within 5 minutes of the liquid and the powder combining, so you want to work really quickly. Okay, so once you've mixed it all up and you've got no lumps, tap off the excess from the whisk and set aside. Give your pigment a bit of a shake first with the lid on, then unscrew the lid and use the end of a paintbrush or a cocktail stick to tap in a few drops. I wanted this one to be really marbled, but you can experiment with just using a little bit of pigment if you wish. And then I use the same paintbrush to swirl the pigment through, but make sure you don't mix it in too much. You want to keep that beautiful pattern. Then making sure your mould is nice and clean and dry. start to pour the mixture into the mould. Now you can experiment by wiggling the jug a bit slightly to create different patterns when you pour, or you can pour quite straight, it's entirely up to you. And then you can use a silicone spatula to scrape out the excess. And remember, if you have got too much mix, you can always put it onto a plastic bag to make terrazzo, but I show you how to do this a bit later. Then you want to tap around the edge of the mould, give it a bit of a flick, put your fingers underneath the mould and bring it up slightly. You want to get rid of all of the air bubbles that have appeared at the very base of your mould. And then just leave it for 25 minutes to cure. I recommend setting an alarm just in case you forget. Then after 25 minutes, you can peel back the edges, which will expose that absolutely beautiful pattern. Then turn the mould over and carefully peel it away. Every design comes out so different. They're all so beautiful and unique. The swirls that you can create from the marbling are absolutely exquisite. Now you want to leave your tray to dry for about 24 hours. So you can simply pop it onto the upturned tray and leave it overnight to dry. Next up is the ombre tray. So as we did before for the marbled tray, you want to give the liquid a good shake first and weigh out 60 grams. Now this is a great tip. I'm actually adding the pigment to the liquid before I add the powder, and that way you can get the perfect shade before the mix starts setting. So we're going to be making the lightest shade first. So you want to shake up the pigment and then use a cocktail stick or the end of a paintbrush just to tap in a couple of drops of the pigment into the liquid. And a little does go a very long way, so just put a couple of drops in as you can always add more. Okay, just set that aside and then put another jug on the scales, and you want to weigh out 150 grams of the base powder. Again, you may want to wear a mask here if you want. So get your mould out ready, and then you want to start tipping in the powder into the liquid and use the whisk to whisk it up really well. Get rid of all of those lumps, scrape it around the edges, get all of that excess off. And keep mixing. You may just want to put a sheet of paper onto the table just to protect your work surface. So again, making sure the mould is nice and clean, you want to start pouring a third of the Jesmonite. Now don't copy exactly what I've done here. I put way too much of my pale colour in first, so you want to put a little bit less than I have. You can then tap in a couple more drops of the pigment and stir it through until you have that middle shade. And then pour the next third of the mixture into the mould right next to the lightest shade. Again, I probably did too much here, but it's all trial and error. And finally, add a couple more drops of the pigment into your jug and stir to make the darkest shade. It's worth noting that the Jesmonite does dry a lot lighter than the shade that it is when it's wet. So here it does actually look quite dark, but when it dried it was actually quite pale. So pour the rest of the Jesmonite into the tray, and then you can use a spatula to scrape out the remaining mixture from the jug. And don't worry if you're having to pour the excess onto the top into the light areas. This will be the bottom of the tray and won't be seen. Then, as we did for the marbled tray, tap all around the edges of the tray, lift it up slightly, give it a little bash on the table to get rid of all of those air bubbles, and then leave it to set for 25 minutes. Now, if you have some excess mixture, you can make up some terrazzo. It's super simple. Just get a plastic bag. I'm using one of those food caddy bin bags. Then use your spatula to smooth out a layer. Now, you don't need to make it too thick. Then you can set that aside for that to dry too. Okay, so after 25 minutes, peel the edge of the mould away, just to double check it has set. Then turn the mould over and peel off completely to reveal the ombre. Or in this case, not so much of an ombre, more of a light to a slightly darker shade, but it's quite nice nonetheless. And you'll see later on that I actually draw a design onto this tray just to give it a bit more interest. And then just rest it back onto the mould and leave it to dry for a further 24 hours. Okay, the terrazzo tray. So once your layer's completely dry, you can screw up the bag and break it off into little chips of Jesmonite. You can make them as big or as small as you like. And then what I recommend is popping them into different pots according to colour. And this is a great example of not having any wastage with the Jesmonite. You really can use it all up if you're really canny. But I'm going to use them straight away on a tray. Sprinkle some of the chips into the mould so they're scattered all over and down the edges too. So, as before, give your liquid a good shake and weigh out 60 grams. Then in a different jug, weigh out 150 grams of the base powder, and adding a little bit of the powder at a time, mix it all up together. Then use your whisk to scrape off any excess around the jug. Now this time round I actually added the pigment after I'd mixed it all up. Then you want to take your Jesmonite mix and then pour it in all over the chips. Give it a really good tap because the chips can cause quite a few air bubbles. And then leave it for 25 minutes, then peel back. Now you'll see there are quite a few air bubbles here, which is fine. And if you want to keep it as is, you absolutely can. Alternatively, if you want to get the true effect of terrazzo, you'll need to use some sandpaper to reveal the little chips. You always want to start with a coarse grit of around 80, and then you want to work your way up to a fine grit of about 600 or more. This will smooth it over. You can then choose to seal it with wax, like Clark's stone and concrete wax. And now for the gold leaf tray. So place little pieces of gold leaf onto the mould to create a line. And then peel back the edges and put some gold leaf just down the sides too. Then you want to make up your Jesmonite mixture with 60 grams of the liquid and 150 grams of the base powder. Give it a good mix with a whisk so there's no lumps in it. And then pour a bit of the mixture into a little cup or another jug. Add a few drops of pigment to the rest of the mixture and use a whisk to mix that up really well. Start pouring the natural Jesmonite first on one end. And then use the terracotta shade for the other side of the gold leaf. Now this one started setting, so I had to work really quickly to scoop it all out of the jug and into the mould. It does thicken and set so quickly. Then give it a good old tap to get rid of those pesky little air bubbles. Then after 25 minutes, you can peel back those edges. I think I really did do a little squeal when I demoulded this one. The gold is absolutely beautiful in the Jesmonite. It takes so well. I think I probably would have liked to have made a bit more of a crisper line of gold so you didn't see the transition between the natural and the terracotta pigment, but that's fine. I still really like it. And then, as we've done before, pop it on the mould and leave it to dry and properly cure overnight. And finally, we're onto the ombre tray where I'll show you how to add some illustration. So here I'm using a white Posca pen. I've already shaken it up and pushed it down on a piece of paper to get the ink flowing. Alternatively, you can use acrylic paint here. And I'm just drawing a very simple white fern. So I did a curved line pretty much to the top and then added leaves either side. I then got a gold Posca pen, gave it a shake, and then started adding some little lines from the edge to the fern. Now I found the very tip of the pen worked best, and I tried not to make them too straight, and I quite liked having them a little bit wibbly wobbly. I then twisted the tray round and started doing some more lines on the opposite side towards the bottom. And then I decided just to add a few little dots and dashes here and there. And I positioned a few just on the edge of the tray too, just coming down the side. I thought that looked quite nice. I was kind of designing this as I was going along. So remember, with any of your trays, if you want to use them as a soap dish or coaster, or you think it's going to get wet, then you do need to seal it with a wax. Now the one that I keep hearing about is Clark's Stone and Concrete Wax. It's the one that everybody's using in the Jesmonite world. So that's the one I would recommend if you're going to use this as a coaster or even a soap dish. And there you go, 5 different ideas for your Jesmonite tray. But which one will you choose? I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much and see you again soon.